Hello, everyone. Today is August 25th. This is a SIG release meeting, one of our biweekly meetings. This is a meeting that is recorded and available on the internet, or will be available on the internet, so please be mindful of what you say and do. Please be sure to adhere to the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, and in general, just be awesome people. So we've got just a few things on the agenda, and I figure let's rearrange them a little bit, given that we've got the release coming up tomorrow. Note that I said tomorrow and not today. So I think the first item let's get updates from the release team. So I'll let Taylor kick it off, and then I'll kick it over to Dan and Rob for some CI signal updates.
Howdy, everybody. So as you heard from Stephen, we are targeting release for tomorrow instead of today. Sent out some updates yesterday evening Pacific time. We are going to be pushing that forward by at least 24 hours. Just give some. We did get some PRs and some fixes in yesterday, and so we wanted those tests to soak for a little bit and get a little bit more signal. Make sure we have everything covered. So currently we're on track for Wednesday as our release. I did want to kind of talk through the flakes and everything else that we saw this morning and get a good sense of that. But obviously we'll turn it over to Dan and Rob on that front. With the community meeting as well, looking at pushing that out to next week potentially as well, you know, barring just when we release and what that looks like, just to give give people some time to think of any other feedback or things on that nature. But wanted to check in a little bit with this team. And we'll be checking with the release team as well to see what everyone thinks of that. Other than that, I don't have any updates, but thank you so much for all the help on 119. It's been a marathon release. I can't wait to share the mascot out with everyone. And the release theme has dropped. It's called Accentuate the Positive. So that gives you some clue as to what you might see for the release logo. But thank you again so much.
Can you repeat the pronunciation of that one more time, please?
Absolutely. Accentuate the positive.
Okay, so it's just one change. Got it.
Thank you, Taylor. Dan, do you want to walk through some of the CI signal?
Yeah, for sure. So we had a few things land yesterday. The major thing that we talked about at the burn down meeting was that the integration job and verify jobs for master in 1.19 were flaking super hard. That was related to an infrastructure change that was made at the end of last week. We ended up reverting that for now, and those have gotten a lot more healthy. In fact, I don't think we've seen a failure on either one of those since that revert. So that was great. For a little more context for folks who weren't following the conversation along delaying the release 24 hours, that was primarily because we had a few PRs emerge kind of late yesterday that we wanted to get some of the scalability tests running on. So we wanted to delay those to see that those soak a little bit. And we're looking pretty good. I think the primary update from a signal perspective is we had a few flakes, which have kind of popped up in the last 24 hours, which is pretty normal. It's pretty normal to see a few flakes every day. And we've logged issues for those. Each of those right now, from what I can tell, looks like test-only issues. So things that are just related to how we're running the test rather than actual the code quality of the code that would be in the release. So those are not of major concern. That being said, we would like to get folks from each of the SIGs that are responsible for those tests to kind of like take at least a quick pass through. And it actually just looks like I just got a message from SIG Node that they're taking a look now. So we'd like for them to take a quick look and just verify, that those aren't critical things and that they are test only, in which case we're comfortable shifting to fixing those after the release. But in general, as you'd measure, like go or no go, we definitely be go right now. Just a few of the jobs have one or two flakes in the last 10 or so runs. So we're looking pretty good. We're going to try and iron out a couple of those things since we have time today. If we weren't delaying the release, I'd still feel comfortable going ahead with where we're at right now. So we're in a pretty good spot.
You already done the outreach to those SIGs, or do you still have anyone else to ping?
Yes, Rob has logged an issue. One other person in CI Signal has logged them. We have tagged the appropriate groups on those, as well as reached out in Slack. So we are looking pretty good on that front. And if, in a few hours we haven't heard on one of them, then we'll follow up again and see if there's someone else in the SIG who can take a look.
So, Dan, this looks like this mirror pod with grace period one looks directly related to what we just merged.
Yes, I think it is related, but I'm not sure that it is it is the same area. It touches the same area, right? But I'm not sure that it's related to the actual change we made. But we do have someone taking a look at that, so we will see. Because
Gotcha.
it's basically the issue is the pod is not being found, and we're using kind of a long generation strategy on the names of those pods. So I'm wondering if we have a mismatch somewhere in the test. But that is the one that I just got pinged that they're taking a look at. So I'll make sure to
Okay,
follow up on that.
perfect. Yeah, I see Seth just assigned himself to that. Sweet. Okay. Any questions for CI Signal release team overall? Okay. So with regards to the 120 release, two updates. One you're probably already familiar with if you're on this call, is that Jeremy Rickard has been selected as the 120 release team lead. I think Jeremy is going to do an awesome job, so I'm super excited for that. We have also selected all of the role leads for the 120 release. So hats off to everyone for a quick selection. Congrats to all of the new role leads. Again, I know you're going to do phenomenal jobs. So the next thing that we have to focus on will be building the rest of the team, building the shadows. And that means that there will be a shadow application inbound soon. So stay tuned. If you have people who are interested in the release team, tell them to follow the issue for assembling the release team, and we will post, as well as making sure they're subscribed to Kubernetes Dev, and we will post the shadow application when it's ready in both locations. Lori, it's entirely possible that I pronounced it wrong, so I have to follow up with Jeremy. That's going to eat away at me all day.
Actually, my name is Appel as well, so.
No. Okay. All right, so any questions on release team before we move on? Okie doke. All right. So next up is release engineering. So I have a few updates on that. And first off is that the final 116 patch will be happening. We initially were going to have 116.14 be the final release for the 116 branch, but there are a few things in the queue. Jordan had mentioned would be nice to train before we officially shut down. And given that we usually cut that final release post the N+3 release, right? So that 119 release, we decided to keep with tradition for now. So 116.15 is targeted to be released soon after the 119.0 release. So the cherry pick deadline for that is this Friday, August 28th. and the actual release date for 1.16.15 will be September 2nd, next Wednesday. There was an email that was sent out, PR merged by Carlos yesterday, and an email sent out to the community yesterday, early this morning. Yeah. So some of the stuff that I've been working on, I've been largely focused on Golang and base image updates and all those fun things for the cycle outside of the usual administrivia. In doing a lot of these updates and starting to move, so one, at the beginning of the cycle, we essentially moved ownership from the from Kubernetes migrated the code for image building from Kubernetes into Kubernetes release. The reason for this is that it's just better, faster, harder, better, faster, stronger, right? The big reason for this is speed of iteration over base image changes, right? Dealing with flaky pre-submits or failing pre-submits on code that is not actually being tested in those pre-submits is a little frustrating, and it's not necessarily a route that we want to deal with when we're having to patch CVs for these base images, right? So kind of made the decision there that it would be they would be better suited in a repo that we could iterate over faster. So I've been doing that over the past cycle. The most recent one, because we've been doing so many, it's gotten to the point where I don't necessarily always know what's inside of the next image that we roll, which is not great. So we extended the Debian base images to support 2 streams. One of the trailing streams is what was initially the V1 stream. If you've seen Debian base images that had a V1 tag in the past, these were primarily images that were on Stretch, Debian Stretch or Debian 9. Sorry. And then Buster is Debian 10. So the newer images, or the V2 series of the Debian base images, are based on Debian Buster. But there's no way to know that by just looking at the tags. So I kind of changed the tag format moving forward. The tag format will be OS codename dash vx.y.z, right? So if you're dealing with a new Debian, a new Buster image, you may see something like image Debian base, case.gcr.io / build image / Debian base Buster dash v200, right? And that will give you an indicator, at least, that we know what's inside of it, that it's Buster. We do need to work on surfacing exactly what images have changed, what things have changed within an image from update to update. So we'll work on that for 120. And sorry, I'm having a bit of a coughing fit. That's fun. So we did something similar for the GoRunner image. The GoRunner image is essentially an addition to, it's essentially distroless ++, right? So it's a few things that we've built into the distroless static image to allow us to do some execing for instances where we require a shell, as well as aggregating logs in the way that we're used to doing for core images. So the GoRunner image is used for, starting in 119, the GoRunner image is used for several of the core images. So think API server, controller manager, scheduler, that we publish as release artifacts. So we've been watching over the cycle how those images perform and are generally happy. We need to continue to support both images in tandem. The reason for that being is that the core images are not the only things that depend on the Debian base images. We have the etcd image, we have the variety of the DNS images that also depend on Debian base. There's an overarching effort to move images to distro-less, or to have distro-less bases. That's been worked over the last 2-3 cycles at this point. So we're making some good headway. That work will continue in 120, and I hope to teach a few of you how to roll the images so that I can do less of it.
What are your
So,
thoughts on that? Like how you would like to teach?
I think I think what we've done over the last few cycles is it's been kind of go, go, go and execution, as opposed to stepping back and being able to strategize about certain things. And when you're making the decision around, do I patch a CV or do I teach someone how to do this thing, right? It becomes the priority leans towards let's patch the CV because it's very important. So I think, you know, I want to do something similar to what we did for the Golang updates, which is record a nice long session of how to do this stuff, but also given that we've seen a bit of a trail off, fingers crossed, on CV activity for the year, that'll give some time to step back and write more documentation and build policies around the process. So documentation on execution, policies on the process, as well as video training and answering any questions y'all may have. I think previously I was a little worried about too many cooks in the kitchen working on the images in tandem, simply because this is roughly kind of newly defined. These were images that previously had been under Google's purview. So there was a bit of learning before actually doing, and now doing, and now stepping back to teach, right? So I think that overall that should work, if that sounds good to y'all.
How long does it take SIG to build an image?
Sorry, what was that, Rob?
How long does it take to build an image?
It's not that bad. It's you know, like 10 minutes or so, right? Given that we have multiple variants of the image, it's you know, times as many variants, but the variants are running concurrently, right? That is simply to build the image. The fun part comes in with the fact that some of these images are based on each other, right? So Debian IP tables and they're so Debian base is the base Debian base image, and Debian IP tables is usually the next one that gets built. Debian IP tables is based on Debian base, and then there is, for previous branches, there is the Debian hypercube base image. That one is based on the Debian IP tables image, right? So there is kind of a lovely cycle of building the Debian base image, promoting it, coming back to build the Debian IP tables image, promoting that, coming back to build a Debian hypercube image, promoting that, and then issuing a PR to Kubernetes to update the actual images that are in use. So it's not too involved. It's more mechanical than anything else. There are steps that need to be repeated, and I do want to teach people how to do these steps before because I know someone's about to say it, and I've been thinking about it. Like, how do we automate this? Soon. We need to. I think we need to have a clear understanding that's not just in my head of how to do it before we start automating everything away.
When do you think you would like to get started on this knowledge exchange? When would be an opportune time, given?
Friday.
Yeah. um, we have to close down the 119 cycle
Yeah.
before I can see
So,
anything.
so in a few weeks, not
Yeah,
at the earliest. At the earliest. So.
going into 120, we will have, so Lori, myself, and the leads, we're working on kind of what stability looks like. Like, what are our common themes for stability? And Lori, I'll let you talk about that a little later. But it's in the cards. It's in the cards. We just want to make sure that we target the most important things, given that we have such a short cycle coming up. Okay, so any questions on all of that? Okay. All right, so next up we did some migration of the, well, I mentioned that, the GoRunner image to Kubernetes release. It also follows that format now, that image tag format, so OS code name dash version number. The reason for that, I got a few questions about why to encode the OS code name. Distroless images are built on Debian, so it's important to know that when we're building them, and it's also important to encode that information into the build. There are two streams of distroless images for static specifically, so static Debian 10 and static Debian 9. Initially, by default, we were people who were pulling static images, distroless static images, were using essentially what is now static dash Debian 9. But we want to be very explicit about what we do. So we want to make sure that that code name is also in the image. So two things happen with GoRunner. The GoRunner binary is built. It's a multi-stage image. The first part of that is pulling in. The first part of that is using a Golang image to build the GoRunner binary, and then copying that into a static Debian 10 image. So information about moving forward, information about both the Go version that is in use during the Google Cloud build, as well as the OS code name, are part of the tags that you can look up on Google Cloud build. All right, so Kubernetes release currently has a merge blocker applied to it. So if you are seeing any troubles with getting things merged into Kubernetes release, that is why. This is a good time. There are a lot of PRs that are inbound that are, so thank you to Sasha, Adolfo, Carlos, and a few others. There are multiple PRs that are inbound that are changing Inago, changing some key things as we start to move into this let's kill Inago entirely path for hopefully for the end of the year. And those will potentially affect how we do releases. So I want to make sure they don't go in until after the 119.0 release, just to minimize the variance that we have in the tooling and everything else that's going on. So thank you for being patient while those things are frozen. We should see them released at the end of day Wednesday, right? Any questions there? Okay. All right, so let's do two things. Let's review any new Kubernetes issues that are tagged for SIG release. And then Lori, I will kick it over to you for board walking. All right, everyone see my screen okay? Cool.
Yes.
Okay. So let's pop a few of these open. So do we want to go over net new things? There are some of these issues that I've already looked at that we maybe don't need to go in over during the call.
Well, just from whatever you reviewed, is there anything to share? Like anything that anyone should look out for? Or?
Yes. So this one is kind of interesting. Questions about Docker hubs, new policies for limiting image pulls. This is a good opportunity. I think this is both SIG release and testing to try to root out images that are being used on Docker Hub. I will say, ideally, we want all of our images to be sourced from GCR, since we have the staging infrastructure and the image promotion policy built around GCR. But I think a lot of it is really about rooting out images that may potentially be from, someone's personal test bed, right? Where this is less an us problem and more so just making sure that I think between release testing and Kate's infra that people are aware that staging repositories are available to them to build out and paid for, more importantly. So, so this is more of a documentation task. This is more of a, I think, searching through Hound and trying to check out what images are targeting which image repositories.
What would the impact of doing this be? Would it buy us time? Would it reduce friction?
Yeah, so we shouldn't have to buy ourselves time if we're using the staging repositories, and most critical processes already are. So this is more about finding and helping out stragglers than process improvement directly
like
within our
completing the
SIG.
job. So completing the job, essentially.
Exactly, right. So there's some updates to the build README coming for 120, probably a redo to remove mentions of Docker machine, since it's a project that's in maintenance mode, and we're also going to look at assessing some of the remote build and Docker machine logic that may still exist, as well as the rsync containers fun thing that we do. We basically build in a container, rsync the artifacts out of it, and then push those around GCS buckets during the release process. So we're going to look at how we can improve that. This is missing a separator. Okay. That's a triage thing. Don't need to look at this now. Interesting thing. I asked Paolo to file this issue because it touches on a few things. As you may be aware from previous calls, that the VDF or vanity domain flip to change the backing registries for kates.gcr.io happened fairly recently. What has fallen out of that are essentially places where people are referencing GCR Google containers instead of kates.gcr.io. That's the inherent problem with this issue, that they're referencing the backing registries instead of the vanity endpoint. Some quick glance things that I'm noticing here is, one, don't reference the backing registry. There are geographic endpoints for each of these. So this would be US, GCR.io would not work for the new one. It would be us.gcr.io or asia.gcr.io or eu.gcr.io for those endpoints. But the real reason I asked for this to be filed is around documentation. We did send out notifications to the community on a few occasions that this was happening and then that this was done. But that does not necessarily hit all of our consumers. One piece of feedback that we got from this, and I hear occasionally, is that what I look for is what the release notes, right? I assume the release notes to be law. This is speaking from the context of consumer. I assume the release notes are law. I look at the release notes and I get ideas of what I need to do there, right? So that said, what I would like folks who are looking at and maintaining the release notes tools overall to take a look at for this cycle, and I can file an issue before the week is out. That we want to take a look at what I think this is two-pronged. One is probably a new label for Kubernetes, and two is a section in the release notes for bubbling these issues up, right? When infrastructure changes happen, right? We consider infrastructure, at least with the labels that we have today and the way the labels are scraped, we consider infrastructure changes to not be features, right? They don't fall. So for Kubernetes release, that is not necessarily true, right? For anything that is potentially changing infrastructure, I consider that to be a feature, a bug fix. So we have kind of a different grading system for Kubernetes release than we do for Kubernetes, right? But if we change a base image, if we change backing endpoints, so on and so forth, how do people know, right? And can we truly categorize it as a feature or a bug fix? It depends, right? If it's not actually, if it's touching harnesses as opposed to like Kubernetes core code, can we, we have kind of like a hand wavy, what's the feature, like what, or where's the line where we would write a release note for this, right? So I think that with a new label, I don't know what we would call this label, release infra, something, right? That we'd be able to target against and say like, hey, here are all the infrastructure changes that we made for this release that you might need to be aware of, right? So any thoughts on that?
I have one. So we're about to add a couple of sections to the release notes. Most importantly, the CV information. So it's time, as you said, we can categorize the issue as with a new label, but probably it's a good time to think if someone thinks that there are other issues, that the other sections to the release notes that have to be added, because we have to add those to the template, and then we have to think of a way of publishing those same sections in the website. So if it would be good to consider if other people would like to see other information being reflected in the release notes, probably it would be a good time to at least foresee what they would like to see there included, to plan ahead the way we're going to do it. We can add the infra modifications rather easily, but if there's more modifications that people would like to see, it's a good time to hear them.
For sure. So yeah, the CV thing is exactly what came to mind, where you're making a change and maybe it's like a secret change, or maybe it's a change that is not within the context of it fitting neatly into a release note, or fitting neatly into the scope of a release itself, right? Maybe it's a change that you've made, for example, Dan, with the infrastructure change that's happened that affected the integration tests, right? That's not necessarily something that we even need in release notes, right? But that's something that was changed, and you wouldn't know that it changed unless you knew that it changed, right? So I think it's partially a context thing. Maybe there is a separate place that we bubble those kinds of issues up. But I think it would be cool if, anyone who's working on release notes, so Adolfo, you, Sasha, sit down and maybe generate some questions you'd like to ask the community, and we can do a survey on that for release notes improvements.
Right, for sure.
I can help you with that, because I like to do a survey, like brainstorm the questions with teams, so I'm happy to help.
I'd make. Oh, go ahead.
Go for it, Rob.
I'd have the one suggestion that I'd so basically, from a high level point of view, we're making a customer impactful change that isn't associated with a set of new features, but does have a customer impact. And so the question is, where do we document that? And good question. The one immediate bit of feedback I'd have is that if we were thinking about labeling it, from our point of view, we would see this as an infrastructural change. But from a customer point of view, they wouldn't necessarily see it as an infrastructural change, even though if you explained it to them, they go, oh yeah, okay, there's a new domain, you're hosting images in a new place. I can see how for you that's an infrastructural change. But from a customer point of view, that they would take a possibly different point of view, in terms of they might see it as a pipeline breaking change, or a build change, or do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So that, yeah, that's kind of what I was alluding to.
Yeah. So from the point of view of labeling and trying to capture this, I'd suggest trying to take a customer, choose a customer, an end user type centric name.
Yeah.
But in addition, I'd also say it's valid for us to label it as an infrastructure change, but we could also additionally label it as customer impacting, and I'll come back to you in 3 or 4 days with better names. But I'd suggest that you could have multiple labels from multiple stakeholders' points of view.
And I would say that in addition to all of that, we need to think about a better process for the late stage release notes, things that may turn into deprecations are fairly easy. We have labels for that, but something that is a major theme, considered to be a major theme, part of a major theme, right? We should have less, because I've seen some of the conversation going back and forth, and Adolfo, thanks for staying on top of that stuff. But essentially, like, thinking about what are major themes, how do we categorize some of these things? We shouldn't necessarily have to rely on getting feedback directly from some Google Doc, and then hand scribing this into another location kind of thing.
We're working on something for that. Actually, this version is based on a prototype I wrote that didn't actually fit because it doesn't fit with the embargo process. And we're going to add some of that to the retro to discuss during that.
Okay. And then also there's something related that's gone from my mind now. But I would say as we're iterating through this, because release notes changes fairly frequently across the cycle, please, I know that there is a PR open already, but please head back to that PR for the KEP update and update it with current plans.
Okay.
I say that to say that on any one day, I'm not sure how to do release notes. And I want to make sure that that's incredibly clear for the community as we move through these improvements.
If we look at this particular proposed change, what is the actual overall objective? Like, we have a lot of other release notes oriented work we can do. So how does it fit into all of those other things? And how might we frame this in the most high impact way?
It's really how to make announcements that impact the customer but aren't necessarily tied to a release. Is that fair, do you think? Yeah. So traditionally, a set of release notes delineates a list of new features and new bug fixes associated with an application. But because this is a cloud-based application, we're talking about a change that doesn't neatly fit into the release notes at all, although release notes is a reasonable place to make such an announcement. But in addition to that, there almost needs to be a separate communications channel to make such important announcements, because ultimately an announcement like this could break an end user, and how to manage that communication stream out to customers. There's a part of me thinking that in terms of responsibility, this is something that would lie with vendors. Just off the top of my head, but like, I mean, that's just
it's as a member of a vendor company, like it's tricky. I think that and we had talked about this in previous release cycles too, and I completely agree. There needs to be another place for information to surface about because not everyone reads release notes, right? Nor should release notes be your only source of information, especially with a project this big. It ties into the whole the release train is coming, right? Everybody get on board. If you want to be a part of that train, we expect things to happen at a certain time, right? We expect you to get your notes in at a certain time. We expect you to merge your PRs at a certain time. And that's all a lot of that is around, I mean, not just fitness of the release, but also the communications that we go through, right? So if you're not in the release, if you're not in the release notes, you may not get mentioned on the CNCF webinar that happens, right? Or you might not get mentioned in the blog posts and stuff like that, right? And that's important to SIGs. I think that the release should not be the be-all, end-all communications mechanism for that. I think that we can maybe brainstorm a little with the contributor experience, with docs, as we're moving through seeing some of these improvements, like the contributor site that is now up, the fact that we have an upstream marketing team, the fact that we have a comm sub team in the release team, we should have a little tighter interlock there, and do some brainstorming on what we can do to improve that communications process. I think that's what I would eventually like to see is, there was a mention of a releases page for that. yeah, that Docs is working on right now. There are a few PRs up and some tracking issues. If anyone knows those off of the top of their head and wants to link them in, that'd be appreciated. There's also downloadingkubernetes.com, which is a repo that we're working on donating in that is pretty it's pretty slick. It's slick, but it's simple. Basically gives you links to download various aspects of Kubernetes across multiple versions, across multiple architectures. So kind of the front end to it's more of an extended, if you think an extended kind of GCS web, right? Extended front end to our GCS buckets for releases. So I thought it would be cool to see if we could donate that, and Chuck had agreed, and that was yesterday. So donation in progress, and hopefully that can all dovetail with the releases and K website work as well. But I see the release notes. What I would see the release notes as when I was starting to think of that releases page is if the release notes ends up having the various change logs end up having front matter, YAML front matter for the website. That means that we can build pages off of we can build these release pages off of the what's in the release notes, as opposed to having potentially two sources of information or two places to update. And then additionally, the header of these change logs could include different places to go for information. Hey, if you want to hear about the things that SIG release did across the release, check out blah, right? Or for up to date, for up to date information on the process to do foo, go check out the contributor site, right? And if I think if we have that, even ahead of the major themes, that gives people starts to give people an indicator that like release notes are not the only place to go for information for those people who only use release notes for that information. Okay, we deeply ate into the board walking time, but I think that this is important, something that I'd love to see tackled for 120, especially every now and again.
I think also we didn't really answer Laurie's question, but it's in terms of giving it an impactful title for this work. But I think between myself and Stephen, we'll give it a headline that Laurie can use to track it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we don't need to resolve this now. We're talking about it, but I think in the
to be
issue
honest,
itself, you can formulate your proposal. Yeah. It sounds like it requires more moving parts, more entities. Yeah. It's a broader scope.
But even the fact that we can't give it a decent task name, it just describes the little bit of trickiness with it. But I will come up with one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will come up with one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. So, Lori, what do you want to do with this 8 minutes?
Well, I guess we can do a lightning round of board walking. I mean, for one, that item probably should appear on the board if it's just going to be a priority between now and the end of 120. If this is a goal, then we should treat it as such, because it will.
And we did talk about kind of like in our meeting, we did talk a little bit about like trailing goals, right? Where there's a bunch of things that we're not necessarily going to complete. I can't guarantee that this is something that we're going to complete for 120. It's something I'd like to see. But I think that will be a little clearer once we aggregate like the true stability goals for 120 and decide on a few key themes.
So yeah, I mean, it's basically like, and also how do you scope the goal to be able to still achieve something in the time frame that you're working with. So if, for example, if this issue is so potentially broad that it's hard to put a name on it right away, then through the discussion work, you can find an angle on that, like a milestone that would be smaller and more achievable. Like your first win on this topic.
Yeah, so
And then there might be
is
future wins. But I don't want to, I don't think we're going to resolve that right now. So I
No.
think with the 6 minutes we have left, we can go through some of the board and see what other goals we've had and if we still want to have them as goals. Because
Sure.
maybe we don't. So if we go through the in progress column, actually I'll share my screen, so this should be more helpful. I'm sharing. I think I'm sharing. I'm trying to share. Here we go. All right, so first we have this updating CI signal issue, and I can't actually see it. So this is from Dan. It's a documentation need, updating the issue title format.
Yeah, there's a PR open for this one.
Okay.
There was some discussion on it. I know Jorge pinged me for an update here. There was some conversation, and I didn't feel like it was totally resolved, but I think I could make an update and kind of ping folks again to run back through it. I think the final decision is like we want a bit of a decision tree. So, you know, we don't have a single way that we name things, just based on the information we have. So I'll make sure to get an update in for that soon.
So
Yeah,
I'm gonna
so
try to push it to the right, although, yeah, here we go. It's
Yeah.
waiting for feedback, right? Or is it blocked?
It's had feedback. I don't think it's conclusive, but I think some of the people who gave feedback think it is. So I think I'm going to give it another pass at updating and then see if it matches what they're thinking.
So we could put it there.
Yeah, so my broad strokes on this one is that yes, I agree that there are two probably decisions that we would need to make. If it's something that is if it is something that is primarily SIG related, we should label it as such, right? If it's a test that cuts across multiple SIGs or is relevant in multiple tests, we may want to label it. We may want to do it job specific, or we may want to do it SIG specific. I think it depends is the answer. So having multiple options for that would be good.
All right.
The automated base images updates, this is kind of what I was talking about earlier. I think from the scope of the original request, we want to next solve the original request. What this turned into was solving for even having control over building the images, right? Which we have done. So I think what I'm going to end up doing is saying that this one is closed and opening a new one in K-release to talk about how we do auto bumping.
Okay, there's only this item here.
I'm leaving that one alone, where we've gotten past the point where it's useful to bring in those changes.
Okay. So should we keep it in progress or kind of
yeah,
like nearing its end?
Yeah, keep it in progress and I'll close it up.
All right. Rebasing Docker images.
Same thing, it's tied to a KEP. I think we need a KEP update. You can see that these are all related tasks. So yeah, KEP update coming in for 120.
Okay. So how will we how will we bring that forward?
What do you mean?
Like, do we follow up with anyone? We just hold it here?
Oh, that task is owned. Both of those are owned by me. So
all right. So.
Yeah, so the distro list one, there's a KEP open for it already that we just need to update.
Okay. CI signal subproject. This is Jorge, and are we gonna do this? What is left to do? I think actually, if I recall correctly, Steve, you were going to draft a thing, and then we're gonna look at that, and then it would go.
Yeah, I think that's what has changed since we were initially thinking about this is the fact that we have more people on the leadership team. And we had been talking about it for a while, but I think this leads into the SIG release charter update. Because it's been a bit since we've done a charter update. I think some things have changed. I think the instantiation of discussion for sub-projects should happen across the SIG. Instantiation of a sub-project is the responsibility, or should be the responsibility, of a technical lead. And now we actually have technical leads. So I think that we should solidify some of that stuff. I think we've been doing it a little hand wavy, finger in the air. This probably looks good to everyone. Let's do it. But moving forward, we should probably do something a little bit more official. But yes, that one owes a response. I will not be able to do any responses until after 119 gets out, probably next week.
So the first step then is to actually revise the SIG charter, and this is a subtopic in that charter update?
This lends itself to the next task being a SIG charter update. I don't think that we need to do that before we do. I think if we come to a decision as a leadership team, this is a good idea, which I think we already have done. We just need to say that to people and get the thing started.
Okay, so what's the next step then for this? What, we wait till next week until to do something?
Yeah, a write-up on the issue.
Okay. I'm gonna skip this one for a sec.
Image triage party.
That wasn't. Oops.
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't know how to. Yeah.
So for those who are working on triage party, there is a new version out, and looks like Thomas beat me to the comment, but I saw the release go out yesterday. So 130, I believe, is available now. And I think what we probably want to do next is update our deployment of triage party to use 130. So I see Veronica, Marco, work with Arnaud to get an understanding of the config, if that's something y'all want to continue working on. And yeah, get it updated. And I think after that, we need to turn this issue into something actionable. Investigation is a little vague, and we should say, okay, we want to use triage party. Let's start doing it, figuring out how to effectively do that.
So I've been working on this already.
Is it assigned to you right now? Should we do that?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect.
So basically, before my move, the idea was that I would prototype how we would like our triage party set up to be, because we've talked about having a single source of truth for work in progress using the tabs function, which would eliminate some of the overhead around flipping around from project board to project board. And so then I moved and went on, vacation and such. But then this work would resume, and I responded today that I would resume.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we are 2 minutes over time. So it has been a pleasure hanging out with all of y'all and chatting. We will catch you at the next one. For everyone on the release team, thank you for your hard work. Good luck coming into tomorrow. Take it easy.